I'm standing outside number 43 O'Connell Street, North Adelaide, and the Blue and White Cafe. Curiously, this was a fish and chip shop that Bevan Spencer von Einem used to frequent. The Blue and White Cafe. As you can see, it says it's been here since 1954, so that makes sense. Von Einem certainly wouldn't have been here until 1983, but it's a most interesting location here on O'Connell Street, as it's very close to several important locations in the Von Einem story. Here I am inside the Blue and White Cafe, having some chips. Very nice chips, by the way, here on O'Connell Street. It's fascinating to think that Bevan Spencer von Einem came in here all the time to buy fish and chips. Maybe ate in here, I don't know. This place has been up since 1954, so all the times he would have come in here and just been another customer. This is the first time I've ever been in here, by the way. First time, even though I've passed this location countless times on the bus and what have you, and in cars, and never knew that this was a Von Einem's go-to place. So but it's generally fascinating to be sitting in here, knowing that he used to frequent here. So as you can see, I'm here at the Blue and White Cafe. Now, this is on the western side of O'Connell Street. Now if I pan over to the eastern side is the very bus stop. There it is right there, that Richard Kelvin and Carl Brooks were at on the night of Richard's abduction, June the 5th, 1983. So you can see how close the cafe is to the bus stop, literally across the road. In fact, this cafe actually played a part in Von Einem's ludicrous alibi. So I'm now standing at the bus stop on the eastern side of O'Connell Street, where Richard Kelvin was on the night of his abduction. And just to again emphasise how close the Blue and White Cafe was, show it from this side. Where is it? There it is right there. You see it literally just across the road. Now on the night of Richard Kelvin's abduction, of course, Von Einem claimed that he'd been heading here to O'Connell Street to buy fish and chips, which I assume he meant at the Blue and White Cafe. I mean, there could have been other fish and chip shops, but let's just assume that's the location he referred to. He said he was coming into O'Connell Street to buy fish and chips on that Sunday night, when he had a run-in with Richard Kelvin. Now while I'm here, I might as well show you the location according to Von Einem's alibi. which is a ridiculous alibi, but it's nonetheless the one that he lived by and still maintains to this day. So Von Einem claims he was driving on the eastern side of O'Connell Street in a southerly direction when he had to make a left turn onto Ward Street. So Von Einem claims he drove into Ward Street, from O'Connell Street, left onto Ward Street, and drove in this direction. Okay, now we'll walk along Ward Street just for a minute. I just want to explain Von Einem's story. When he was first spoken to police on July 28, 1983, 4 days after Richard Kelvin's body was found, Von Einem denied any knowledge of Richard Kelvin, anything to do with him. And he maintained that story up until, even after his arrest. He was arrested in November 1983 and charged with Richard's murder. And of course he continued to maintain he knew nothing about Richard Kelvin or what happened on that night. But in February 1984 his committal hearing began, and that's when the prosecution presented scientific evidence such as fibres and hairs which linked Von Einem to Richard Kelvin, proving that Richard had been in Von Einem's house and in close contact with Von Einem. Just days later, Von Einem changed his story completely and attempted to come up with an alibi why there was physical evidence linking him with Richard Kelvin. He comes up with this story. As I said, that he drove to O'Connell Street looking for a fish and chip shop, which I assume is the Blue and White Cafe. And he couldn't find a car park on O'Connell Street, so he drove left here into Ward Street. Should be in this location. It's starting to spit rain at the moment. He says he drove here onto Ward Street, and then he came to this street, which is Boulton Street, which runs left off Ward Street. He says he drove into this street and was driving in a northerly direction down here to where the corner of Marian Street was, which is the little side street that runs off O'Connell Street, where Richard Kelvin was jogging from after leaving the bus stop. This is Marian Street here. As you can see, that's O'Connell Street over there at the far end. I'm now in Marian Street facing Boulton Street. Yeah, so Von Einem claims that as he drove along here around this vicinity on the corner of Marian and Boulton, Richard Kelvin suddenly ran in front of his car. Von Einem slammed on the brakes. Von Einem leaned out the window and said, "Hey mate, watch where you're going," something along those lines. He then claims that Richard Kelvin put his arms onto the car of Von Einem's car and spoke to Von Einem through the window. Richard Kelvin supposedly noticing Von Einem drinking a can of beer and asked Von Einem, could he have a drink? And Von Einem, being the gentleman that he was, asked him, he said you could have a drink, but you got to come in off the street. So he claims Richard Kelvin then got in his car, assumed he had a sip of beer. While they're sitting there shooting the breeze, Von Einem then claims he asked Richard if he wanted to go for a drive, which Richard did, says he did. And while they're driving, Von Einem suggested they go to his house to relax, which he claims Richard said yes. And of course he took him back to his home, which was in Day Street Paradise. Spent an hour or two shooting the breeze and then dropped him off in the city on North Terrace, where Richard Kelvin must have made his way home before being abducted by a completely different set of abductors. That's Von Einem's alibi, which of course is completely and utterly ridiculous. There's more holes in it than a fishing net, and anyway, it's just too ridiculous to even consider, but that's what Von Einem is stuck to. And so this is the general location where that was supposed, that mythical encounter happened, which of course it didn't, but of course Richard was abducted a bit further on up Ward Street. So I just thought I'd show you this part of the story. I'm standing on Childer Street in North Adelaide. I thought, well, I'm in the vicinity, I'll have a quick look at another location tentatively identified as being connected with the Von Einem. Yeah, this is Childer Street, North Adelaide. And a story that I heard is that in circa December 1971, a 15-year-old boy was sitting on a fence waiting for his sister to come home at a unit or a flat along here somewhere. And now the exact address I don't know. Probably somewhere along here. Now the boy said he was sitting waiting for his, that's looking east toward O'Connell Street. As the boy was waiting for his sister to come home, a noisy car came barreling along this road, heading east, so on the northern side of the road, from that direction. The car stopped near the boy. A man got out of the car, a young man in his 20s, got out and began fiddling around with the exhaust pipe or something. The boy offered him assistance. They put the exhaust pipe back on the car or something, which had apparently fallen off. Sounds like a ruse. And then the man invited the boy to sit in the car with him, which the boy accepted. As they were sitting there, a bit of chit-chat developed. And then the man sexually propositioned the boy. The boy obviously rejected it and got out of the car. That's when the man became quite aggressive. And the boy began running, and the man get run over by a car here. And the man started chasing him. And the man started chasing him in a westerly direction to what is, I believe, Jeffcott Street. Now, what I heard, the man, this 12 years later, as it starts to rain again, the man later in 1983 saw Von Einem under arrest for the Richard Kelvin murder, and he said that was the man who chased me that night. So the boy said he ran here from Childer Street into Jeffcott Street, and then began running in a a southerly direction. Young boy ran along Jeffcott Street until he came to Gover Street, and then began running eastward along Gover Street. He said the man was still following him in his car, so he came this way, Gover Street. Continued running along Gover Street until he came to Mansfield Street. And would have begun and ran in a southerly direction this way. So he ran down Mansfield Street before emerging here on Tint Street, North Adelaide, and began running in a easterly direction towards O'Connell Street, where he found safety. He went to a police station on O'Connell Street and managed to avoid the clutches of the man chasing him, allegedly Von Einem. No police station there on O'Connell Street anymore. In fact, I don't ever really remember one, but that was 1971, some 51 years ago. So we're on 10th Street now in North Adelaide. This, ironically, Channel 9 studios used to be down here. Nothing to do with this case, of course, but with the boy being chased, but of course that's where Rob Kelvin worked for so many years and made his name at. Don't think they're here anymore, the studios. Coming up to O'Connell Street anyway, so yeah, just thought I'd show you these sites. Light's a bit poor there, isn't it? How's that? Yes, I just thought I'd show some of the scenes associated here in the O'Connell Street, North Adelaide region. Just emphasising also that how it shows that this was Von Einem's hunting ground, so to speak. Serial killers are very territorial. They tend to hunt in places, the non-transient ones that is, tend to hunt in places that are familiar to them and they become comfortable with. And clearly Von Einem was comfortable around here. He would cruise up and down O'Connell Street and King William Road in the city, relentlessly looking for young men, hitchhikers, etc. So yeah, a lot of things happened in this general location. The fact that one of his favourite fish and chip shops was on O'Connell Street was also indicative of that, which probably explains why he went to such brazen lengths to abduct Richard Kelvin in what was a very risky abduction, particularly considering Von Einem's previous murders. He was quite methodical and organised. It was a very disorganised attack on Richard. But yeah, so I just thought I'd show you some of the scenes of Bevan Spencer Von Einem and his haunts here in North Adelaide. See you next time.